Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to this show. I'm so excited. I am Lainey Savante Wolkin, and Joanna has the night off. So maybe she'll be tuning in. Who knows? But I'm here, and oh my gosh, I'm so excited about this show tonight. And if you are here, and we'll wait for everyone to kind of come on, let us know who's here. And I hope you're a Beatles lover because we're talking all sorts of things tonight. And you're going to be blown away by my guest when he comes on. But I wanted to just welcome everyone, give you a few minutes to, hi, Denise, come here and be part of this. We say it's a magical mystery tour, but it's definitely going to be an experience. And we've had a lot going on. So hi, Tony. We're going to get into it tonight in just a few minutes. We've had so much going on, and energetically, I'm in love with what's happening, and I'm just so grateful for what you have. You're here and for being part of our cherries. One of the things coming up, and I just want to mention it because I don't want to forget, but for those of you here in Southwest Florida who know Kristen Collins, she's an amazing human being, an absolute spiritual dynamo, spiritual warrior and connector. She has put together this workshop that Joanna and I are going to be teaching. And I want to mention it now so you can save it, mark your calendars, because similar to StarCon, where we were last week, this popularity of these hybrid events where you can come live and then you can come in person or watch it live is happening. But I'm just going to pull this up on screen. And then the rest of the show, oh my God, wait till you see what we have in store for you. All right, so let me just mention this before I even get into tonight's events. So this event is called Awakening to Intentional Eating, Nourishing Your Body for Complete Emotional, Mental, Physical, and Spiritual Wellness. And this is going to take place here live at the Collaboratory in Fort Myers on Wednesday, February 23rd from 4 to 5 p.m. And there's limited spots in person, and it's selling out. So we want you to come if you want. And no matter where you are in the world, you can also attend it live. And we are going to do exactly that. We're going to really discuss what it means to be awakened. And when you're awakened, what do you need to do to sustain that energy in your body, and what is intentional eating? And now some of you may know some of these, especially our certified readers. Hey, Durga. But we want to make sure that you attend this class because it's so important, and it's kind of a foundational piece moving into some of the other teachings. In fact, we'll be there on April 9th at a bigger summit that she's holding with several people. But this particular summit or this workshop is just Joanne and I. So I'm inviting you in advance, and I'll put it in the comments too. All right. So that's out of the way. Very few announcements tonight because we have a lot to cover. Again, if you are here, mention hello if you can. Don't be shy. And now I'm going to introduce our guest tonight, and I guess we're co-hosting the show. So Frank Kwiatkowski, hopefully I got that right. I practiced it and met Joanna and I oh my God, was it just last weekend? I just can't believe it. It seems like we've been friends a long time at StarCon. And I was completely blown away because there was a shared understanding about how amazing the Beatles are. And if you're a Beatles fan, please let us know. And anyways, he comes from a great understanding of the world of esoteric practices and metaphysical being and divination, and how he's fused his worlds together was really impressive, and how we're fusing our worlds on so many levels with food. It was just a great collaboration to pursue and see about being here and our future class. So welcome to the Real Time Wisdom Show, Frank Kwiatkowski. Hey, did I say it right?
Yes, that was a very kind introduction. Thank you so much, Lainey, for having me on your show. I'm just so happy to be here.
Yeah. Was it just last weekend? Because that almost seems a little like time warp.
crazy as it is, it was just a week ago that we had StarCon. You do kind of enter a time warp when you go to tarot conferences, I think. I don't know the metaphysical reason for that, but magic happens at tarot conferences. And I think it was a magical weekend we had last week.
Yeah, it sure was. And you had a packed house at the Beatles and Tarot class. And for those of you who are here, let us know if you're tarot people. I know you're oracle people because you're here with the Food Healing Oracle deck. But we're actually going to talk about that tonight in so many ways. But why don't we give people a little bit of a background? I gave just a sliver, but maybe let them know what you are all about, Frank, and what brought you to this moment to bring the Beatles to the forefront in our esoteric la la land, woo woo world.
Well, the Beatles are ripe for a deeper look. They are just so ubiquitous. I mean, first of all, my name is Frank Kwiatkowski, and yes, you did a great job with my last name.
Cool.
We won't ask anyone else to have to repeat that, but it is Kwiatkowski, and so thank you for saying that correctly. Sure. Yeah, I'm just a huge Beatles fan. They're just so great. It's not a surprise when you ask who's a Beatles fan. So many people are. Either they're a huge fan or at least they kind of like them. I don't know. I mean, to say that you don't like the Beatles, I think is just being contrarian at that point, because they are just, their music has become the standard songbook for rock and roll in a way. And I love listening to the Beatles, of course, but one thing that I've discovered is in my blog, it's on tarotawakenings.com. That's my website. Shameless plug, but that's my website. The reason I'm bringing it up is because I write a blog on there where I correspond different tarot cards to Beatles songs. I've been a Beatle fan since I was a kid, especially since high school. I got super into them.
How long have you been a tarot reader?
I got into tarot about 9 years ago.
Okay.
I've been reading it professionally for about 6 years. You know, I had to get to know it really well for the first few years that I was reading it for myself. But yeah, I've been reading it for about 6 years now or so. And so I started writing these blog posts about these remarkable correspondences between Beatles songs and tarot cards. At the essence of the messages of Beatles songs, they just seem to they just seem to remind me of different tarot cards, and so I really love to write about them. It's like a little passion project of mine.
Love it. Well, I've always been a Beatles fan, and as you know, we're in the music industry here, and have for those of you who don't know, most people know me, but my husband is a music producer, and we have a couple record labels and a recording studio, and you know we're big Beatles fans here. But I have to tell you, you know, I've been obsessed with Get Back, and for those of you who haven't seen it, you've got to see it on the Disney Channel. But I can't believe in all the years that I have been a Beatles fan and now being so engrossed in the Food Healing Oracle deck, it wasn't until watching that I made the connection about Apple Records and the fact that Apple Records was what they chose to name their record label. Apple, Steve Jobs, you know, named his company Apple, and Apple's is our abundance card. And it just was, I'm sitting here looking, for those of you who most of you know our deck, but if not, there's our Apples card as abundance. And it just felt like this rush of energy about apples and how, and a million other reasons, which we say in our deck, why apples are abundance. But it's like traveling in the same frequency that the Beatles and Steve Jobs, and you know, what's with the apple? I mean, there's something to that, right?
That's a great question. I feel like as somebody who's a really big Beatles fan, I should know for sure why they named their company and their record label Apple. I don't have an exact reason for that, but I think you touch upon something. There is something truly universal and even magical, dare I say, about apples.
Yeah.
I have heard it said, you know, when you cut into an apple, it does form a 5-pointed star in the center of it. Now, I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but there might be something to that. But the deeper reasoning behind an apple, I don't know, but it just resonates somehow. I just really like it, and I think a lot of other people do. I wanted to mention too, since you brought up Get Back, that it just so happens today is the anniversary of that rooftop concert. It was 53 years ago today that they did that rooftop concert.
Oh, I have chills. And this was so unplanned, but not planned, right? The universe conspires. Wow. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's really, I can't wait to tell my husband that. Gosh. Well, okay. Moving on from that. One of the most interesting things about your presentation that you brought to awareness was your discussion of the elements. And for those of you who follow the Food Healing Oracle deck, that's a really huge component to our existence. So I don't harp, but I impress, because here the deck is Nourishing Wisdom from Mother Earth, and we talk about the elements and that we are nature. And so in order for us to be well, we have to understand that the elements are speaking to us, and nature and elements are the same, and we are nature. So then when you take, and you can touch on this, Frank, just about how elements play a crucial role, a key role, a lead role in tarot, that everyone has to, like, the awareness is now showing up. And now we'll talk about Beatles in a minute, but maybe just talk about your perspective with tarot and the elements as we do. And we'll talk about the food tonight. And we're actually going to be doing a group reading based on the elements. I mean, there's so much we're going to share about tonight. But why don't you touch about maybe elements in tarot, and then we'll bring in the Beatles.
All right. Well, one of the reasons I love tarot so much, I mean, there's a lot of reasons to love a tarot deck, but one of the things that I that I like to talk about with my students and the people I do tarot readings with is that the tarot, what makes tarot special is the structure of the deck is basically perfect. And it's constructed of the 5 elements, the 4 primary elements, and then of course there's the 5th element, or the quintessence, if you will. But the structure of a tarot deck is a lot like a playing card deck. People forget that a tarot deck, all those images that you see, they're not arbitrarily ordered in there. There is a structure to it, and the structure is just wonderful to work with because it takes into account the 4 primary elements and then the 5th element as well, and they are the 4 suits. So just like a playing card deck has wands, they have clubs, hearts, diamonds, and spades. With the tarot deck, we have cups, we have wands, swords, and pentacles or coins. And each of those suits corresponds to one of the elements. So with wands corresponds to the element of fire, and fire. We all have our inner fire inside of us. Meanwhile, cups correspond to the element of water, and we all have the inner water inside of us. Swords are the element of air, and pentacles or coins are the element of earth. This is something that the psychologist Carl Jung wrote a lot about too, was the 4 elements, and that all 4 of those elements exist within us and outside of us as well. In other words, you could say that all of reality could be broken down into the 4 primary elements plus the 5th element.
Mm-hmm. Prior to the Food Healing Oracle deck making its debut into the world, I was a certified tarot reader with the 5th element. And I don't know if you're familiar with that deck, but they're very good friends of mine. And this is a wildly popular deck, Teresina and Martin Bakkens. And their deck's called the 5th element. And it's just, and she's an artist, and it's just an extraordinary deck. I haven't used it in a while. I know some people here have used it, but it really talks deeply about the need and the essential components for us to understand how to balance life's questions, life's meanings in our existence. And then the food healing oracle deck comes into play, and we're talking about what foods represent the elements and how to counteract if you have too much fire, and how to bring in things to cool them down with a little bit more water, or if we're too on our head, we're in that air element, how to bring things down to earth. And if you're doing the same thing with tarot, it's the same concept, is just learning to look at the tarot cards of what the universe, the soul, your collective is consciousness is asking of you. So I find this conversation fascinating, and I hope the people, hey Cheryl, do too, because it's like you said with tarot, it's the structure, but it's the structure of living here on the planet, is understanding these principles. Don't you think?
Absolutely. And it's not just an academic exercise either. I mean, it's fascinating in and of itself, but I don't know about you, but when I'm working with tarot, whether it's reading cards for other people or reading them for myself, I read cards for myself every single day. And by understanding these 4+1 elements, we can bring them into balance in our own lives, and we can become more complete people. If you're lacking in motivation, or you have too much motivation, or you're burning too hot, there's probably something going on with your fire element within you. Yes. Again, either a lack of motivation or too much. And when those wands cards come up in your readings, it gives you a chance to look at that and make adjustments based on the rest of the cards in the reading. Likewise, you brought up when you've got things going on in your head, either you're thinking too much, or you're too nervous, or you have racing thoughts. Well, there's the element of swords, the suit of swords in the tarot deck, and it gives you an opportunity to see those things. It's like you are witnessed and validated through the tarot cards, and it gives you a chance to actually examine those things and work with them. So it's not just an academic exercise. It really helps you live a better life, grow and evolve and live a better life.
And, there are people, I haven't done it lately, but there are people who are avid tarot readers and avid oracle and some certified food healing oracle deck readers, where they will do a reading with both decks. They don't exclusively use one or the other, and you can absolutely see what's going on. You can pull a swords and then need what foods are going to ground you into the earth. You can really see that. But later on tonight in the show, we're going to do a group reading, because we are talking about the elements, and it is understanding as a collective where we're at energetically. And before we start the show, Frank reminded me of tonight's the new moon, right? New moon?
It is. Yeah. Overnight tonight, we go into the new moon.
Yeah. So, and what does that look like? So we'll talk about that later. So stay here for that reading, because this is really important. So what does that look like? What does it mean? What does the elements want to tell us? But before we even get to that, let's now talk about, now that we've kind of got them understanding a little bit. And by the way, if you have questions, anyone, about anything we've talked about so far, tarot, oracle, nature, elements, please put them down. We're happy to answer them. And now, what does this all have to do with our favorite band? What does this have to do? I can't wait to share that with people.
Well, one of the main parts of the presentation I gave at StarCon, it was called The Beatles and Tarot, a fab combination. And I already mentioned this thing that I do on my blog, where I correspond Beatles songs to different tarot cards. But the other part of the presentation was understanding that the Beatles were a perfect foursome. We know them as the Fab Four, but what I talked about is that each of the four Beatles represents a personification of one of the four primary elements. So when you bring those four together in perfect balance, what you have is something as transcendent and downright magical as the music of the Beatles, because those four elements came together just right.
Yes.
So that's one of the things I talked about. Each of the Beatles represents one of the four elements.
Well, before you unveil who is what, I would love everyone to put who their favorite Beatle is in the comments so we can get a sense, because everyone pretty much has a favorite, right? They all gravitate towards one or the other.
We Beatles fans know that we love all the Beatles. There's no such thing as not liking any of the four Beatles.
That's true.
Right? But you can't help it. You do have that one Beatle who you probably like just a little bit more than the others. So by all means, have your people put in the chat box if they had to choose who their favorite Beatle is, who are you going to go with? Please let us know.
All right. Can you see the comments, Frank? So far we have, oh, you can't? So
I can't.
Okay, we got one for Paul so far. We got one for John Lennon. And who knows, it may change after you watch Get Back. So I know people want to know, but I got to tell you a story, and then we're going to tell you which elements belong to which, and maybe they'll be able to guess. But I had the pleasure. I guess I'll be public about it. It's okay. So I had the pleasure. I worked for Robert Redford back in the day, and his wife had a big event in Monaco. And she was being honored, and Ringo Starr was being honored. So I flew to Monaco, and we attended this big event at the Jacques Cousteau Museum. It was amazing. And then everyone's trying to get to Ringo, and they're all taking pictures outside. There's a yellow submarine outside.
Wow.
And it was so perfect. Everyone's trying to get to Ringo Starr, Ringo. And I think he and his wife, Barbara, right? They duck out. And later on that night, the two people I was with, we were starving. We didn't know where to go. And we just kind of like stumbled our way through this small little street, dark. And we were like, I don't know, this Italian restaurant looks good. And it's completely empty. The entire room, the restaurant's empty. But they walk in, they invite us in, and we go to the back, and there's only 3 people in there at one table. And who do you think it is? Ringo, Barbara, and one other gentleman. And I thought, that's so amazing energetically, because here all these people are trying to get to celebrities, and I come from a background of working with a lot of celebrities, and so like we just naturally like gravitated energetically to the one restaurant, and they're in there. And
wow.
So we said hello. He knew I was with, Mrs. Redford. And that we didn't sit with him. We just said our hellos, talked for a few minutes, and then we sat and had dinner. One of the best dinners ever. One of the most expensive pastas I've ever had in my entire life. It was like $30 for like this little thing of pasta or something. But isn't that cool?
Oh my God.
You couldn't have planned it.
That's an amazing story. I so wish I had a story like that around the Beatles, where I had a chance to meet one of them. Not just meet one. I mean, that would be amazing in and of itself, but to actually spend some real personal time. I mean, so you were just hanging out chatting with Ringo Starr, huh?
A little bit, yeah. And I do have a picture somewhere, and if I find it, we'll show it at the because we have a workshop coming up on the 12th, but I didn't find it in time for tonight, but I do have a picture with us talking and stuff. But I thought you'd appreciate that.
Absolutely. Yes, I definitely want to see that picture. That is really, really cool. The only thing that I have that could even come close to that, and it can't touch it, I'll just say that first, but the closest thing I have to that, when I was in college, I was also a big Beatles fan back then, of course, and Paul McCartney was, I went to school in Buffalo, New York. That's where I'm originally from. And Paul McCartney was coming in concert. This was 1992 probably or so. He was coming in concert to Toronto. And my best Beatle buddy in college, whose name was Frank also, we used to hang out, talk Beatles, listen to the Beatles. And he was like, can you believe it? Paul McCartney is coming in concert. We have to go. And I said, oh yeah, absolutely we do. Well, way back in the Stone Age of 1992, you didn't have the internet yet. So the way that you got concert tickets was you went to a place, you stood in line, and you bought a physical ticket. So for whatever reason, I couldn't go, but he said that he could go overnight and spend the whole night waiting outside for Beatles or for Paul McCartney tickets. And I was like, thank you for doing that. He's like, yeah, of course, no problem. I must have had an exam or party or something. Who knows? I couldn't make it for whatever reason. And so the next day I was like, well, how did don't tell me it's sold out. I mean, tell me you got a ticket. He was like, yeah, I got tickets, and you'll never guess. I said, well, what are you talking about? He said, front row tickets to see Paul McCartney. So that was like the coolest thing. That's like the coolest Beatle thing I had is my buddy Frank got front row tickets to see Paul.
That's pretty amazing. Congrats. Wow. That's a good story. I love it.
I didn't get to meet him, but it was still pretty cool. And we were like, cool. We were way off to the side. It's not like we were front row center or anything. We were off to the side, but still, it was front row, legit.
I don't know. One day I'll have to write a book because I got a lot of those stories, actually, not Beatles related, but celebrity related, but I'll probably never do that. But that was one of the most memorable things. Oh, we have Christine, one for Ringo. We got a couple we got a lot of John Lennons. All right. So now that some of the people started to pull that in, am I putting that presentation screen, or you're going to just talk about it, or how do we want to do it?
Maybe I'll just talk about it first, because the presentation screen is going to be an interactive spread that we're all going to do together. Hopefully, whoever's watching here has their decks with them. If they don't, that's okay, because we'll pull cards for the group, so that's no problem.
Okay, great.
But before I just kind of spill the beans, I'd like to offer whoever's watching and listening in here to think about the 4 elements themselves. Think about the fire side that exists within you, the water side that exists within you, the air and the earth. And now imagine those 4 parts of the personality as different Beatles, as different elements within the Beatles. And just who do you think would be the fire? Who do you think would be water, air, and earth? I'm going to share just what I've come up with, but this is more fun because it's more fun if we get everybody sort of involved with their opinions too, because I'm a huge Beatles fan. I love tarot, but this is just my perspective. Everybody has their own intuitive perspectives on this too. So whatever I'm going to say, I don't hold as like the only way to look at it. There are plenty of ways to look at it. And this is especially true when I'm comparing Beatles songs to tarot cards.
I love that you just said that, because in the Food Healing Oracle deck, you can pull, let's just see, I'm just going to arbitrarily pull a card. Asparagus. Ooh, there. And asparagus can mean an element. I mean, our cards and our foods can mean one element, or they can relate to all the elements. So it's subjective. And also, it's personal, but there's a structure, there's a framework, but there are times where things may shift, and you can see very many facets to the diamond, as they were very multifaceted beings. Oh my gosh. All right.
So now those of you who are into astrology, because a lot of people are into tarot and oracle decks and stuff, maybe you're into astrology too, and you may be thinking, well, maybe it relates to their signs. If one of them is a fire sign, then maybe that person is the fire, and so on with the other 4 elements. But I will say that of the 4 Beatles, 2 of their zodiac signs match the element that I give, and 2 of them don't. But it's just a reminder that we are much more than just our sun sign in terms of astrology. We have all those planets, and it's much more complicated than that. And really, I'm not saying that these are the 4 elements throughout their entire lives. It's the primary element that they served within the structure of the Beatles. And so when we talk about the element of fire, and fire is the one I always like to start with. And the fire, the Beatle who would remind us most of fire would be all those fans out there who said John Lennon. That's what I'm thinking too, is that John was the fire of the Beatles. And why would that be? Well, I mean, he founded the band, and he was the leader of the band. And when we think about fire, the element of fire, that oftentimes relates to leadership. It's the spark. Yeah. It's the passion. And John was the passion of the Beatles.
Pita energy.
Especially early on. Now, things changed later once Yoko came into it and all of that, and he started to disengage from the Beatles. But when you think about early on, before they got famous, and then in their early albums, he was the unquestioned leader of the band. what he said, what he would say goes within the band. And he also had a very fiery personality, didn't he? He had a bit of a temper. He was very acerbic. He was known to have a little bit of a temper issue. He's kind of a macho personality. The songs he wrote were kind of macho, and masculinity or being macho, that corresponds pretty well to the fire element as well.
A little egoic, a little ego in there.
A little ego in there, exactly. But of course, if it hadn't been for that ego, if it hadn't been for that, we can do this, where are we going, fellas? He would ask the other Beatles, and they would say, to the top, Johnny. And he would say, and where's that, fellas? And they'd say, to the toppermost, to the poppermost. That was like their little inside thing that they would do. So he was always motivating them and inspiring them. That's very central to the fire element.
Cool. All right. So fire. All right. Why do you like to start with fire, by the way?
Just traditionally, fire is the first element that's listed. And that goes to certain, it goes to esoteric practices around the Kabbalah, which I don't think we have time to get into all that. But
Kabbalah, I mean, I can't believe time's ticking.
But I mean, the Kabbalah talks about the four worlds, the four esoteric worlds, and the first world that's the highest world, if you will. It can get really complicated, but the highest world, if you will, corresponds to fire. So just traditionally speaking, the fire would be the first element that's listed.
That's interesting. I think my other favorite band growing up that got me obsessed with the elements is Earth, Wind, and Fire. And that literally, as I mean, my entire existence living was like, they were larger than life for me. And everything about them and the elements, like I was hooked into understanding elements. Our wedding was element-based theme. So I've always earth, air, earth, wind, and fire, but I always done earth, air, fire, and water. So, but it's interesting. That's great information for people to know. Yeah. All right. So we have fire. What's next? Who's next?
Earth, wind, and fire left out water. What did they have against water? I'm just curious about that. They only had three elements in the name.
You're right. Earth, wind, and fire, and water is so important. But I tell you, their songs would make me cry. So maybe there's the water element of it.
Oh, I love that. There you go. Yeah, Earth, Wind, and Fire is awesome. I should check them out again. Yeah. All right. So next Beatle. So traditionally, when we talk about the Beatles, say, oh, it's John, Paul, George, and Ringo. That's normally the way they're listed. So we'll go with Paul next.
Okay.
And I invite whoever's listening to imagine what they think Paul is. And I'm probably going to say the element that you may not expect, because I would say with Paul McCartney, it's the element of air. Now, most people say water. And when I first thought about the Beatles and the four elements, I thought it was water. I almost took it for granted it was water, because we think of Paul and we think of the love songs, and he was just the melodies he wrote and just the way he was, it would seem to be water. But I gave it a lot of thought, and I've come up with air, because really air relates to intelligence and genius. And I see Paul as
the analyzer,
really the musical genius of the group. He was almost like a shapeshifter too. Like I have a Beatles tarot deck. There is such a thing that exists, a Beatles tarot deck. And in that tarot deck, they have Paul listed as the element of earth, which is kind of weird, and I don't really agree with that. I have a Beatles book where they have him listed as water. And so I think of Paul, he's almost like a shapeshifter. Like he can fill whatever elemental role is required at the time.
I would have said water before I saw Get Back, and then I immediately would have shifted to air.
What about Get Back changed your perspective on that?
Because he had the fire of the driving, but the way his brain was just pointing out in thinking and catching everybody, if they were just like a hair off, or it really needs to have that element not element in terms of elements, but a musical piece. Just the way he was so brilliantly tracking every single person and creating and what needed to back off, add in, pull back. Like from a music perspective, it was very Air.
I love it. Yeah, that's a really good point. Or one of the most famous scenes from Get Back is where we see him writing the song Get Back right there on the spot. It is just so amazing. And it's like he's plucking it right out of the air. He's playing his bass. He's kind of getting into a groove. And it talk about hair standing on your hair standing up. That happened to me as I was watching him write. We literally get to watch him writing and composing the song Get Back right there on the screen. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so more of the Air. I mean, he was the conceptual one. He had the really good ideas. Like Sgt. Pepper was his idea. Magical Mystery Tour was his idea.
They're the creators.
Yeah, exactly. And he also composed the most songs in different genres compared to the other Beatles. He did pop songs, he did rock songs, he did dance hall, he did ballads, he did westerns, he did Helter Skelter, the heavy metal song that the Beatles did. That was Paul's song. So he could really do all kinds of different things.
And blues. Yeah.
And blues.
There are a couple good blues songs.
Yeah.
I
was just going to say, and then his solo band was Wings.
Oh, don't even get me. We'll have to do another show just to talk about that. Yeah. Venus and Mars is all right tonight. Okay. So how many people, I wonder, guessed Air, or if they wondered water? Okay. So we have fire and we have air.
Fire and air. So next up would probably be George Harrison. And so for George, I would say water is the element with George. George was the quiet Beatle. And when we think about still waters, they run very deep.
That's beautiful.
George was the spiritual one. He was the mystic. And these are traits that we could associate very well with the element of water.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add into there. It's just so perfect that you would say that, because he was so tuned into the mysticism and his spirituality. He was able to move into a more elevated divine feminine, and to bring in, and water is feminine, and water is a receiver, right? And a conductor. So that is perfect for him.
Very well stated. Yeah. I mean, he learned, especially, he, like the other Beatles, got into the psychedelics and all of that, but he recognized pretty early on that that wasn't really the way for long-term spiritual growth. So he shifted from psychedelics into Eastern mysticism, and he learned to receive, which is the water element. If there's a single word to use, it's learning to receive. And so he learned to receive his intuition and all of that. So,
and one last thing, just with when you think about where they ended up and where he went on after they broke up, and he received empowerment to come out more of his in his truth, and make the songs that he was meant to be, not just be kind of the sidelines filling in, where John and Paul wanted. So to me, I mean, we could do a whole show just on water element and George Harrison, because there's so many complexities that you see. And I always like, I wonder what they ate during those times. And I'm just thinking, from an elemental perspective, did John eat a lot of red foods, and were there blue foods in George Harrison, So, all right, Ringo, bringing it back to Ringo.
Ringo. So of course, the fourth and final element is the element of earth. And I think along with John seems pretty easy to say that he's the fire. And I think Ringo is very clearly the element of earth for a number of different reasons. I mean, he was the most down to earth personality of the Beatles. He was relatable. The other three wrote all of these amazing songs. They seemed almost untouchable, and yet Ringo is the one that people could really relate to. He had a wonderful sense of humor. The kids liked him. it just felt like you could hang out with Ringo, and you literally did do that. But
I
it
did
just,
do that.
but from a musical perspective too, I mean, the fact that he was the drummer,
I was going to say it. Yeah.
his beat was the very foundation that the music was on. You know, there were drummers back then like Keith Moon or John Bonham who were very flashy and did all kinds of crazy things, but not Ringo. Ringo is respected as a wonderful drummer because he kept just a perfectly solid beat. And
He
that
was the foundation. He was the root chakra. If we did a whole chakra discussion of the Beatles, he would be the root.
The root, yeah. And I mean, the element of earth also relates to things like money in the body. And Ringo is relevant here too, because he grew up very poor, by far the poorest of the four Beatles. And he grew up very sickly. He spent a lot of time in hospitals with all kinds of physical ailments. And yet he pulled through all of that. And then later on, he became kind of the flashy Beatle in terms of cars and flashy rings. That's why he was called Ringo. His real name was Richard Starkey, but they named him Ringo because he wore all these flashy rings. So money and elements of, or aspects of health, these relate to the element of earth as well.
Powerful. Any feedback from anybody who's watching this? I hope your mind is as blown. Tony, I know you saw his presentation. You're probably seeing and hearing new things tonight. Well, if you think this is exciting, I'm just going to have to fast forward. The reason we're having this great introduction tonight for all of you is that we're going to be doing a future workshop on Saturday, March 12th. And if you can tell by now, there's a lot of crossover between not only the Beatles, but music, the elements, tarot, oracle, and all the metaphoric references and inferences that we're sharing about. And we're going into a much deeper dive in this 2-hour workshop. And we invite you to come along. I'm just going to throw a little, if you want to talk any more about it, I mean, we're developing it as we go, but it is what we already can see what's downloading is going to be an extraordinary look at food, music, and metaphors and everything in between. But we're going to kind of go deeper. Any thoughts on that, Frank? I know I'm excited that it's going to come together. Come together. I didn't even plan
that. I'm really excited about it too. And you know, I feel like we're just scratching the surface in terms of talking about the four elements and how the Beatles correspond to the four elements. But I really look forward to bringing in more of the food oracle deck as well. We haven't been talking nearly enough about it. I wanted to say just, I mean, as much as I love tarot and I'm very loyal to tarot, and I don't really use that many oracle decks, which makes it that much more notable that I really liked yours and that I bought yours, and I've even been using it in the week since I saw you. I just think this thing is great, and I look forward to bringing this in to the workshop a little bit more. And as we get ready to do our little exercise, you know, we'll work with the deck, but I look forward to doing that more in the workshop that we'll be doing.
Absolutely. And that's great because we do the deck here every week, and this is bringing another aspect. And it's interesting because we've had lots of tarot readers on the show before, and in other all sorts of divination practices. We're going to have how to divine with mala beads coming up in a couple weeks. There's just so many ways to look at how to bring in, you know, those questions that we need to bring forward more. So thank you for that. Did you speak? So you have been playing with the cards. Is there a particular card that like stuck out for you, or a reading that you had, or anything that's come up for you since you've been playing with the deck?
Well, actually, I was looking for a little bit of insight for this show. Actually, I was like, well, what is a one card reading that I could do that would just give me a little bit of insight to help me, you know, come on the show and be at my best with you. Okay. So, you know, I had that thought clearly that intention clearly in my mind. I spoke it out loud. That's usually what I like to do, is if you know what it is, be very solid with it. And I was shuffling the cards as I did that. And then I pulled a single card. And the card that I got for help for this show was this one. I got figs.
Ooh, figs. Wow. So what do you make of that in your intuitive knowingness?
Well, it's a beautiful picture, and I wish I would have had some figs in the house because maybe I would have actually eaten some figs. But what I like about your deck is you can either work with the food literally and eat them or mix them in some sort of a recipe. I don't have any figs in the house, but you also include the keyword as a way of working with that energy. And in this case, it was meditation. So I
Yeah.
did a little bit of quiet meditation before I came on the show today to get nice and relaxed,
Yeah.
to be ready, to be quiet of mind, so I could come on and just be relaxed and ready to go, and that helped. It was just the right message I wanted to hear before coming on.
Well, thank you. That's cool. Thank you for sharing that. That was one of the first cards that we, found the right food. And if you look at that card, doesn't that fig look like a geode, like a crystal geode, like an amethyst for me? And it just goes back to the nature. If you look at that and you're thinking about those colors, you can think about actually like the crown chakra, and meditating in those elements, which is purple and white as well. So we kind of move in between chakras and elements and what to eat. When we say they're going to eat their words, and that used to be like a bad thing, but we're saying yes, eat your words, because that's how we intentionally bring forward the desires, emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. So we will kind of weave this web when you all take. Hopefully, you'll sign up. It's already on foodhealingdeck.com, and it's $38. And we invite you to join. We will be crossing the universe into this really deeper discussion. You can see we can talk all about this, and it's fascinating. And we're barely, it's already 47 minutes in. So I think we could do a very quick reading in the time that we have left. And then for those who take the class, we'll dive into a much larger experience. So we mentioned earlier about the new moon and going into this phase. And this is the month of February. We're moving into a time of renewal. Anything else you want to touch on that, Frank? Because the reading is going to be like, what is Mother Nature? What is the energies of the elements want us to know for everybody who's watching this about this new moon, this time of renewal?
I really, as part of my personal tarot practice, I will always do a special reading for new moons. And because there is something to be said about the renewal process. We hear it all the time that every day is a new opportunity, but daily cycles can kind of get lost in the shuffle because daily cycles can become a little bit of a grind sometimes, right? We all get that. And then we have our yearly cycles, and people will always set New Year's resolutions for the yearly cycle because it's such a big deal when we go into a new year, and that's all fine and good. But in between a daily cycle and the yearly cycle, we have this sweet spot right in the middle, which is the lunar cycle or the monthly cycle. So you get this opportunity for renewal every single month. And all it is just dialing into the new moon. It's kind of funny. It just so happens to fall on the first of the month this month. February 1st happens to be the new moon. It usually doesn't work that way. But so I keep an eye on what the lunar calendar is, and whenever it's new moon, I will do a special reading to tap into a new energy for that month. And it'll last, like 29 and a half days is what a lunar cycle is.
Super cool. Yeah. I did a reading, one of my clients today, we were working on some things, and this was a very important card for her. It's hard to see it, but it's kale. It's our fertility card. And if you notice, I don't know if you notice the Fibonacci sequence sort of in food. It's pretty cool. You see it in celery. You definitely see that sequence, that spiral in kale. But this is our fertility card representing new beginnings. And it was really like just time to like let these old patterns go, let them fall behind, let them stay in the past, and move into this fertility. This is a ripe time of renewal, of mindset, of I wouldn't even say diet, of lifestyle change for wellness. So apparently I wasn't aware of the new moon at the time I was doing her reading. So this is a great message if for everybody, is if you got this Kale card. I'll be curious to see if it comes up in the reading we're going to do now.
Nice.
All right. So you have the deck with you. Mm-hmm. So how would you like me to put on screen, or what would you like to do?
Do we have time to do a 5-card reading? Because that was the spread that we had.
I'm a little worried that we don't. We got so much else that we talked about. So maybe we switch gears, and I'm just going to maybe call on a couple people that I see some names, and we can just see if they are Paul, if they are Ringo, or if they are John or George.
Well, and we can save that spread for the workshop, actually, because it's a 5-card spread, and that doesn't necessarily have to be the only spread we do. I imagine we'll have all kinds of fun stuff going on, but that'll be something that we can save for the workshop.
I think so.
We can bring that into it.
Yeah, and I think I'd like to use one. Also, I have one of the spreads in mind. I'd like to do the chakra spread. I mean, we'll do a couple different spreads in relation to all this and the Beatles. So fun stuff on March 12th. You have to be there to see what some of this is. So the first person, it just came to me. I see Christine Dunn. I'm just literally just seeing where the energy is lighting up. So Christine, so I'm going to defer to Frank since he's our guest here. Do we want to just pull a card? First off, Christine, can we pull a card for you? Do you want to have a card pull? And if you're still here, let us know. And then secondly, I think if so, maybe Frank, I can pull, if you want, I can pull a card from the Food Healing Oracle deck and we can talk about it. And then you can pull a card from Tarot, or we could just stay with the deck. Or how about we just stay with the Food Healing Oracle deck, and then you can talk from a Beatles perspective on what energy elements are. So first off, Christine says absolutely. So you want me to go first? I'll just pull a card and we'll go from there. And however you want to come on in, that will be great.
So the card here is the opportunity for Christina, is it?
Yeah, it's for Christine.
Christine. What's
the energy that she needs to be aware of in terms of elements during this time of renewal as we're moving into this new moon? Okay. So my card is acceptance. And this to me is an element of air. I'm sorry, element of water. So can we guess why there would be an element of water when we're looking at onions? Okay, so we know onions make us cry. Unless you know the trick of putting them under cold water before you cut them, makes a huge difference. But in terms of an element, I'd be looking at this, Christine, in terms of what energy during this time of renewal of receiving and being a natural giver and kind of out there all the time wanting to make sure everyone's taken care of. This time of renewal is to renew you, to fill up your tank, to fill up your glass, and to bring in those water elements within yourself where you need to be met. Little self-care time is what I'm feeling for you.
I love that. That's good.
Anything you want to add to that? And if not, if you're complete, we can move on.
Well, just for the fun of it, I pulled a tarot card, and I know the main focus is your deck, but here I've got this tarot deck with me as well. So I just pulled one randomly, and around your situation, I get the 4 of Cups. How about that? That's the water element as well.
Can't make this up.
So it's extra water. In this case, I invite you to look at the image here and make sense of it what you will. But with the 4 of Cups, we're oftentimes talking about the opportunity to take a time out and gaining greater comfort within yourself. Not rushing. You don't have to do too much. You don't have to put any pressure on yourself. You notice it's a person who doesn't look like they're in a big rush. It doesn't look like they are putting a lot of pressure on themselves. And so with the 4 of Cups, tying it back to what Lainey said, it's emotional renewal. It's a time to recharge your batteries, if you will, is what I would say.
Well, look how perfectly paired, because the onions card is acceptance. And in this time of doing more for you, it's like accepting what that is, accepting what you're able to do, accepting limitations, and accepting what you're wanting to receive, and let go of the rest. So those two go really well together. All right, Christine. All right, Denise. I think we'll have time to do Denise and maybe one more, and I'm just going to scroll. So Denise, are you up for a reading? I just want to never assume and make sure that we're good here. So, and if there's anybody here, that's why I always say put your name in here, because I, never know when we're going to call on you. But Denise, if you're here and you want us to give you a reading, let us know. And I'm also feeling to give one to Durga. So Durga, if you are here, let us know if you would like us to give you a reading. Denise says yes. So I'm going to let you go first, Frank, and then I'll fill in with the Food Healing Oracle deck, if that's okay, unless you want me to go first.
No, it's totally fine with me. As I was shuffling the cards, I had one jump out. And usually when you get a jumper, it's some sort of energy that very much wants to be heard, wants to be seen. And for you, the tarot card that came up is the King of Swords. And this is a very powerful card. It's the element of air, and it has to do with authority, standing in your place of power and authority, making wise decisions, and not feeling like you have to be secondary to anyone or anything. It's really a place of being in your power, primarily mentally. So it's clear thinking, being authoritative, and being well understood.
I love that. And Denise is an amazing healer, but she also just released a spiritual recording, a meditation called Mindfulness. Right?
Perfect. Yeah.
Right on. Okay, so the card I got for her is Sweet Potato. And sweet potato, although it's not an air element, it actually is the message for her is to start being comfortable with that new place of power that Frank was explaining in his card, is coming into this comfort of like stepping up, that you are the one to be seen instead of the support system, actually being comfortable up leveling into this new way of being.
I love that. That's a perfect addition, putting those two cards together.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. And by the way, Christine said, just to follow up, thank you. I've been creating a lot more white time in my calendar. Amen. I'm sorry that was quick, Denise, but and I didn't know if, I know Durga sometimes has issues with her internet, but if Durga comes on, great. If not, I think we're going to complete it there because we're just about out of time. But you can see, and we haven't done this before, right? We just met and we're coming up with there's a field that takes place when you kind of tap into it. And that's what we're inviting you all to do. And that's what we're inviting you to understand about why the Beatles were so magical. They were this perfect holographic, representation to me of spirit. And the food is, the messages from spirit also come through the food. And that's why this whole idea of coming together was so nice. Tina, what is saying here? What is she saying? Oh, let's see. Tina, there we go. Oh, the show is always a good one to watch. Oh, thank you. Well, Frank, so I'm going to put the bigger piece of our event coming up so people can take one more look at it. And then hopefully you guys can share this with others. But we invite you to come to this. It's a Fab 4 look at elements and how to nourish our soul through the ancient and modern arts of divination. And we're really going to bring forward so much information. This is just, again, a sampling. And of course, it's brought to you by Tarot Awakenings and the Food Healing Oracle deck. And you need to register by the 11th. You'll never look at food or the Beatles the same way again. Frank, thank you so much. This was fun.
I can't believe it's been an hour. That went by like it was 5 minutes. So thank you very much for having me on. I can't wait to do the workshop with you, and it's great to make new friends. So thank you so much, Lainey. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, someone's asking for your website. So let me just put that in the comments. It's go ahead and give it to me.
It's Tarot Awakenings. TarotAwakenings.com.
Okay, tarotawakenings.com. And if you want to go to the purchase the class, you would have to go to foodhealingdeck.com for anybody. It's there. Please share this with all your friends. This is going to be up on both LinkedIn, Facebook, and actually YouTube in perpetuity. You could share this away. We'll see you on the 12th next week. We have another great show coming up in a couple weeks. We're going to be doing a whole understanding, a deep dive into malas and meditations, the art of meditation. And we're going to have Durga actually on our show. She's an amazing, she makes handcrafted expert malas. But interesting, I'll just say this as a teaser. Did you know at the StarCon, they had that table where you can leave something, take something? I love that. Like leave a deck, take a deck. Well, I left a meditation CD that we had done, and I picked up a book, and the book was The Ancient Tibetan Arts of Divination. And I read it the other night, and it showed how to do divination using a mala bead, and I was blown away. So we're going to talk about that. See, you might want to start watching our show, Frank. You never know what you're going to learn here.
Nice. I think I'll do that.
Cool. All right, everyone. Blessings. Be well. Be safe. Go listen to some Beatles music. Go watch Get Back. Tune in for more information. Make sure you eat well with the Food Healing Oracle deck or smoothies. And thank you so much for being here. Many blessings. Take care.
Bye-bye.